Falling behind in the polls recently, Rishi Sunak has sought to divert attention away from the various scandals swirling around the Tory party. One way to do this is to place all of society's blames on immigration. And so, in March 2023, the Tory government announced the illegal immigration bill.
They will not stop coming here until the world knows that if you enter Britain illegally, you will be detained and swiftly removed.
Under the bill, those who arrive in small boats will be banned from ever claiming asylum and will be swiftly deported to a third country, such as Rwanda. Much like Sunak and Braverman's previous immigration plans, these measures have come under scrutiny from human rights groups who have condemned the bill as inhumane and illegal under international law. Dover is the first stop for many who are forced to make the perilous journey across the Channel. And so today, we're going to speak with one of the organisers from Channel Rescue, an activist group that monitors the border force and its treatment of asylum seekers. First of all, can you tell us what Channel Rescue is and why it's needed?
Yeah, so Channel Rescue is sort of a humanitarian and legal observation organisation. So the long-term goal is to advocate for safe passage, safe routes to the UK. And the information we gather is trying to sort of facilitate that and lead to that as hopefully a long-term resolution.
Can you describe the kind of things that you actually do on your missions?
So we will physically spot using binoculars and telescopes to look for perhaps activity such as a dinghy that might be out there if it does get that close to shore without being sort of picked up or intercepted in the channel. So that would allow us to see if there is someone out there. If it looks like they're getting into difficulty, it would allow you to alert, the Coast Guard or somebody like that. So yeah, we'll be physically spotting for boats that we can see. We'll also be using the AIS app, which allows you to see the location of where the different boats are. So we'll record where there's activity happening, things like the distances, the location, what's taking place. We hope that by showing the border force and sort of government organisations in the area that there's people recording what's happening, we hope that would sort of provide some sort of overwatch that might dissuade them from doing things that they're really not supposed to be doing. In September 2021, I think it was, the border force did a pushback training drill off of the coast near Dover. Because we were able to record all of that, it gave us a lot of useful evidence which we could use when we did a legal challenge alongside Care for Calais and the PCS Union, and it meant that we could show sort of direct evidence of what pushback would look like, discuss what the risks are, discuss why it breaks sort of international maritime safety laws.
Tell us what kind of incidents you've come across while doing this work with Channel Rescue.
I think the really significant thing has probably been a presence around when unfortunately there's been horrible accidents. I think, November 2021, there was, I believe, 27 people drowned in the channel after they got into difficulty, and last November 22, 4 people also lost their lives crossing the channels. I believe the people on the boat made contact with authorities from both the French and the British side looking for search and rescue, and I think there was a miscommunication or perhaps even maybe a lack of motivation to respond to it, and I think as a consequence there wasn't anybody from either France or Britain who attended within a decent timescale. So I think when something like that happens, the information that we collect is really key. Because often there are investigations into this kind of thing. Obviously
we're doing this anonymously, and so I think, could you tell us the reason for that? And I'm guessing it's to do with the far right.
Yeah. So there is a far right presence on the coast in Dover. It takes a variety of different forms, like often there are people doing a similar kind of thing to us really, but obviously with different motivations. But yeah, there's certainly a far right presence growing across the country, but in Dover in particular there's a focus on it. This has been a town with a lot of arrivals of new people. The far right who are here, they have the potential to make things quite difficult or potentially quite scary for volunteers. So they've been known to arrive at spotting points in the same location that we are. They've been known to spend time down at the docks, recording people who are arriving, sometimes unfortunately harassing people who've arrived. there's been volunteers from other organisations that we know who have had quite a sort of open and visible presence down here, and you know, their identity is very well known, and unfortunately they actually received, you know, death threats and threats of violence. There's been discussion from even people like Nigel Farage about channel rescue. So yeah, if anyone was to arrive, it's very obvious who we are and what we're doing, and it could lead to some difficult situations.
So speaking of people like Nigel Farage, we've had the Tory chairman, or the deputy chairman, who has referred to activists on the coast as being as bad as the smugglers.
It's not a funny situation, but that does almost make me laugh. Like it's completely not true. If they had to argue that standing on the cliff, looking with binoculars and recording information is somehow aiding people smuggling, it's just a ridiculous thing to say. You know, we only communicate amongst ourselves. Obviously, there is zero association with any kind of people smuggling. So it's, again, I think it's just another line to distract. You know, they are utilising this situation to whip up anger and probably distract from other bad things that are happening in the country. So they need as many scapegoats as possible.
We've just been talking about the far right, and there seems to be like a rise of far right attacks, you know, on refugees across the country. Do you think that, you know, the language used by politicians, particularly like Suella Braverman and Nigel Farage and these kind of people, do you think that's creating an atmosphere where the far right feel emboldened to do what they're doing?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think probably the most recent example and very sort of blatant example I can see is that Rishi Sunak appeared on a podium with "Stop the Boats" written underneath, which is a line and a slogan that you see on signs and banners and all kinds of social media that's used by the far right. And I think they also stoke this image of it's becoming unmanageable, it's becoming a drain on public funds, all these kind of things. So yeah, the language is very hostile.
Something that I often think about is that the government don't actually propose these laws because they're feasible. They propose them to sort of activate their base. What do you think about that?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I think that's true. I mean, it's very noticeable that every time things get challenging in the UK from a sort of financial and quality of life point of view, you know, the cuts to public services, the decrease in quality of life, it's all come as a result of, you know, the policy of the current government over years and years. But it's noticeable now, for example, we have this cost of living crisis. A lot of people are really struggling, and all of a sudden the rhetoric surrounding boat crossings and refugees and immigration has just gone through the roof. Every single time that happens, or every single time a party aren't doing well and there's kind of a focus issue in the media, they just push and push and push the anti-immigration, anti-refugee rhetoric.
So let's talk a little bit about the illegal immigration bill. So, you know, what kind of effect do you think this is going to have kind of on your work and also on the people that are crossing the channel?
I'm not certain it will have a huge effect. You know, we've seen legislation in other places that really hasn't worked. I mean, I think we've seen more than legislation. We've seen in some areas, for perhaps out in the Med, active violence being used by, you know, Coast Guard and government organisations, and even that hasn't dissuaded it. I think that right now they don't have the legal ability in terms of actually enforcing this to prevent people crossing, and I think if people are really motivated to come, they will still try. The Rwanda flight situation, for example, that was going to be the big deterrent, and it's really not made any difference. And again, a similar thing that they might run into with this is also met legal challenges, which have sort of successfully proven that it's not a workable solution.
As we record this video, the illegal immigration bill has passed its second reading in Parliament and is due to reach the committee stage this week. If it is eventually passed, the new powers will allow for the mass detention of tens of thousands of people for up to 28 days without bail. It will also reverse a ban on child detention and allow for the deportation of unaccompanied minors. Victims of torture, trafficking and slavery will not be granted even temporary permission to stay in the country. Critics say that this will discourage such victims from coming forward. The bill is one of the most controversial this Tory government has proposed. Braverman has even admitted that it may break the Human Rights Act by failing to comply with the European Convention on Human Rights. Well, whatever happens, the Morning Star will be covering the story. So go to morningstaronline.co.uk for more.